You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Christiane Vejlø, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Christiane, and welcome to The Only Constant. I've been looking very much forward to doing this episode with you for a couple of months. Also, personally, because a lot of my friends said I should definitely have you on the podcast. And my wife gave me your book, which I have right here a year ago. And that's my wife who until recently didn't even want to discuss AI with me. So maybe that's why she gave me the book, but we'll see today. But I'm really, really thrilled to have you here today and looking very much forward to this conversation. And I know you have a special anecdote on why you'd like to be on The Only Constant, right?
Well, thanks a lot for having me, first of all. And I love the title of your show because it's actually some kind of motto that I've been living by for many years. I think it's probably about 20 years ago, I bought a necklace that's very dear to me. It's a very beautiful necklace, as actually a pearl choker. And in the middle of this choker, there is a little plaque or a little metal plaque where the text is, there's the only constant is change. So in that way, it's a good match, I think.
Are you wearing it today, Christiane?
I am not wearing it today. No, I did consider it, but I'm not. It's quite fancy.
also could have been a little cheesy, but I really love that anecdote, and you just told me just before we started recording, so I think that's absolutely brilliant. But Christiane, I've read your book, Arguments for Humans or Arguments for Humanity. I don't know how you want to say it in English. And I'm quite intrigued by some of the perspectives that you put out in it, and they're obviously very much about what it means to be human in a world of technology taking over so many aspects of what we've previously deemed human as well, right? So first of all, some of the things that I think a lot about is that I am a history major, which is, I've said that previously on the podcast, which might be a little bit weird in a technology space. But as a history major, I've always seen, history is defined by when we put things into writing to some extent, and language sort of shapes who we are. So how do we distinguish a language technology like LLMs from what it fundamentally means to be a human?
Yeah, that's a big question. And the title of the book is Arguments for Humans, and which is also Arguments for Humanity, because it really is a question that I get a lot. What space is left for humans when AI can do a lot of the things that we previously considered to be human domain? So I've defined 9 arguments, and those are some of the things that are uniquely human, and also things that I believe that we need to cherish and also cultivate in an age of AI, because that's something that we have where it is hard, if not impossible, for the AI or the technology to compete with us. It's about having a body in the world and sensing it. It's about having experiences. It's about having emotions and feelings, and it's about believing in something that's higher than yourself, and it's also about dying. So those are some of the things that I explore in the book. And funny enough, you say that your background is as a history major. My background is comparative religion.
Awesome.
Definitely also humanism and a lot of philosophy. Basically, for me, religion is also always some kind of expression of what it means to interpret being human in the world and how we explain some of the things that we consider unexplainable. And with that, it's very interesting to look at AI because it has started to play the role as what we previously considered God, giving us answers to very difficult questions, making calculations that we don't understand, but we still agree to let be a big part of our life or run our lives. Like basically algorithms run our lives in many ways already. And with your questions regarding LLMs, it is language, but it is not human language in the way where human language is also a human experience when it is used by a human. So when we speak or write, we have a history, we have an experience, we have emotions, we have relationships. The AI doesn't have that. It is just accessing text and text structures and spitting out statistically relevant answers, which many times may be very fitting to the questions. And sometimes, we are surprised how intelligent it sounds, but it still is just a machine. It doesn't have any of the human experience.
Yeah, but that's also, I think your book was also, you wrote it in 2023, or
Mhm.
I don't know when in 2023, or which models you had access to. I don't know. I don't even know if it matters, but I'm going to try it anyway, because I think one of the things you write in it is at some point that that these large language models, they don't understand what's going on. They will give you a wrong answer. I think actually, and also some subtleties they don't get. I think they're getting better at understanding these subtleties. Most of the things when I ask them, it sometimes they they almost over understand the subtleties, and sometimes they completely miss it, right? So is it even fair to say either or in this regard, that it cannot do or it can do, or is it just some other type of intelligence? I'm just curious about what you think.
Or I first of all, I've tried to be as time neutral as I can with the book, because obviously this is a field that develops really quickly, and
Mm,
and I do want my book to be sort of more generally relevant.
yeah.
So I have had access to many models when I wrote the book, but also there some things change all the time. But the fact that it misunderstands or misinterprets or doesn't get subtleties is still a fact. It's getting better, but it's still a fact. And I think the big problem is that we just don't know when it fails and when it doesn't.
Mm,
And for example, looking back just a year ago, you would make a prompt to get an image, for example. And like I have a prompt that I use in my book, that I'm prompting. I would like to see salmon swimming in a creek. And the image that comes out is not, a happy fish swimming in a creek. It's like a piece of salmon from a recipe for a salmon
yes.
dish, right? So the machine totally misunderstands what I mean, because it doesn't know what it means to be a salmon, or the many ways salmon can be. It can be in a shop, it can be in a recipe, it can be in a river. Um, and that's very clear for us to see that that's not right. Like the result is wrong, but it has become harder for us to see when the result is wrong. But there are still very many wrong results. You know,
Mm,
Another image is of a monkey playing chess. It looks photographically correct. It really looks like something out of the National Geographic or something. But if you look at the chessboard, you will see that there are three kings, and
yeah.
there are too few fields on the board. And in that way, you only know that if you know how to play chess. So the machine has taken something that is chess-like, but not chess in the understanding that we human beings who play chess have of it. So it doesn't understand the rules. It doesn't know why we play chess. It's just put in some kind of chess. And I think that makes it sometimes even more dangerous, because we think we get something that's correct, but we don't have the knowledge to understand that there are flaws in it. It could
Mm,
be a problem, let's say, if it's something very complicated anatomy, for example, something that we use for an operation as doctors, or a diagnosis or something. And if the AI has made an image of the insides of a human being, and, the spleen is the wrong place, a doctor
mm.
would know that, but, you and me wouldn't know that. So you need to have very specific knowledge to understand the mistakes, because they have become more subtle, but that doesn't mean they're not still there.
Yes, you need to be good at what you're doing and good at using the AI at the same time. It's actually a double requirement, right, for humans
Yeah,
to
you
use it.
you need to be able to be good at prompting and be very precise. Use your own creativity and imagination, because really that is the human experience that we put into our prompts to get a good result. Even if it's an image where we want to see something that's sort of, we have the image in our head, and most of us are not very good at drawing or painting. So it's actually a creative possibility of getting something out of your head and exemplified.
Mm.
Um, but we need to be still very creative in the prompt. So prompting needs creativity to get an interesting result. Otherwise, it's just going to be very mediocre. And we
But
have
also need
already
the
so many examples of very mediocre results.
But we also need this verifiability, right? Being able to verify the results of
Exactly.
it. That's what I meant, right? So you can't replace your competencies, right? Maybe you can replace one of them. If you have three people, maybe one will not be needed in the future, but you still need to retain the two, or at least you need to still retain the competencies to know what is a good output. That's your point, isn't it?
But there's a recent example here with a children's book that came out, or it was coming out, but then they realized that all the images of animals that they've prompted were wrong. Not all of them, but there was quite a huge number of mistakes in the book, like a giraffe with 5 legs or something like that. That type of mistakes.
Yeah, a wolf with 2 rows of teeth, right?
Yeah, it's like if you're used to prompting, you would probably realize that. I mean, to me, that sounds very sort of amateurish prompt and process, because it's so important to be really critical of the results that are coming out. And when it's a children's book with animals, it's like it's you have such a big responsibility of the results that come out. That's why the book has also been pulled back. But that is just a good example of how important the prompt is, and also verifying the result. And I would say that's why I argue how important it is to put different people in a room together. Because when we use AI and when we verify AI and we replicate and push results from AI, we need to challenge each other, because some people are an expert in one area and some other people in another area, and that we need someone that says, "Hey, a wolf teeth doesn't look like that," or you can't reach that doorknob if you're in a wheelchair, right? So that the process of innovation is very dependent on us being different and challenging each other. So we can work with AI, but humans need to be sort of the litmus test of it all.
I've become personally quite annoyed at the whole anthropomorphizing this machine, and I think that's also your point, right? But I've become annoyed at the idea that we should just talk to it like you talk to anyone else. It's just natural language. I hate the term natural language because I think it's more chaotic code, because you have to it's still a way you're prompting a machine. You're still coding it. So I've previously called it chaotic coding, right? And it basically means that you're sort of activating some models in the brain of this very big supply chain of AI models, I usually call them. So they've seen so much, and some things they haven't seen, and you need to activate exactly the things you need. And if you activate the wrong way, you'll get the wrong results. So if you start by accepting that and accepting it's a machine, one of the things I've definitely taught myself over the last years is to be extremely harsh at it. So it sounds nice when it gives you something back, but then just telling it, no, you completely misunderstood. That's not what, being really rude, actually, because maybe when they take over the world, I'll be the first one in camp or, exterminated. But my point is, being rude to it, it doesn't matter, because it just needs to know this was not what I wanted. And if you're nice to it and you feel like if you, Christiane, came to me with something you've written, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, but I'd be forgiven. I'd be pragmatic. I'd say, maybe, okay, we can work with this, but actually just being like, no, I can't work with this. This is crap. Do something different. And I think people need to understand that, because else they'll go down a route, right?
Right.
They'll just...
And it's extremely interesting. And I actually also cover this in my book, because, and again, back to philosophy and what it means to be a human, we tend to anthropomorphize anything, anything that looks like it has eyes. It's like a power socket, or clouds or whatever. It's really something that's built into our operating system, and we can't help that. Also, we cannot help relating to something that sounds and looks like us. So in that way, we actually have a weakness when we meet AI, because it is posing as us. I understand that this is a very efficient interface, because we used to have we had to have certain skills to talk to the machines before. We had to be able to program, which wasn't very democratic, because it was an elite and very technical people that could do that, which didn't represent sort of the population as a whole. Now the population as a whole can work with the machine because it speaks our language. So in that way, it's a very efficient interface that also democratizes this technology. But the thing is that we start considering it as something that is like us when we talk to it like us. And and not like you, most people will actually be very polite when they talk to the machine. And I think that there is an interesting consideration in this, because on one hand, I actually do think that we should have a decent language to the machine, not for the sake of the machine, but for us.
You
Because
write
it
that
is,
as well, and that was actually something that sort of made me think.
yeah.
That
And
argument.
I think that, that we should speak in a decent language to the machine because we are humans, and that is what we do or should do as humans. So
To retain our pristine, I don't know, respectful tone of voice to each other as well,
yeah,
right? To
to
respect
retain
we have in
humanity,
language.
even
Yeah,
when you speak
exactly.
to a machine. And you can say the machine doesn't care. It absolutely doesn't care. It can pretend it cares. It can say, that's a hard word you use or whatever. It could actually have a reaction, especially if you program it to have a reaction.
But it's
But
the same thing. But I completely agree, because it's the same thing when you go to social media, right? I think I remember my wife. She's a teacher. She had a class once where she said, "Okay, let me just pull up a Facebook profile from one of you in the class." So she pulled up a girl's Facebook profile, and the girl was like, "No, no, 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 don't do that." And she was like, "You know, all of your friends and 700 other people can look at this profile every day, whenever they want. So me putting it up here on the whiteboard, it doesn't make a difference at all." But it did, right? So it's the same thing, right? If we sort of disconnect humanity and politeness, right,
Mhm.
from how we operate with AI machines, maybe we also do that in real life. Like suddenly, what you could write on an angry, I don't know,
Yes,
a
because
troll
that's the
post,
next
right?
thing. The next thing is that we are moving into a world where we won't be able to see the difference between the
Mm,
AI and the humans. We will be meeting customer service and coaches and fitness trainers and, all kinds of service AI personnel that we will be communicating with on a daily basis. And they will be looking like us and speaking like us and making jokes and asking how your day was and things like that. So it's going to be really hard for the human brain to not feel some sort of sentiment or connection to this machine, which is also why I argue that it is extremely important. And whenever we have an interaction with an AI, it should be very, very clear that it is AI.
mm.
So we don't listen to a piece of music without knowing, is it made by humans or is it made by AI, for example. I think it makes a difference even if we cannot tell the difference. It makes a difference because there's an intent when a human person is talking. There is emotions, there's experience, there is the human experience, and we don't have that. The AI is dead. It is lifeless. It is just a calculation. And I think that's why we really need to have regulation that makes sure that, when we meet AI, we know that it is AI. The other thing is that I understand why you talk back to it like that also, and I partly do it myself. I am not polite to my AI, but I'm also not rude. Um, but I do say very harshly, like, you're mistaken. Uh, what you did was absolutely wrong. Or, I would talk like that in
Mm.
a way that I probably wouldn't talk to an employee. I definitely wouldn't talk to an employee. But that's just because I've reached a point where I'm like, it's a waste of time to be
Yeah.
polite to the AI. But I think it's something we need to be really conscious of. Because I also think that when we, in the near future, when we're going to have like our list of people we talk to on Messenger, for example, or WhatsApp, maybe 40% of them will be AI because they will be our coach or our, relationship counselor or whatever.
Mm.
And it's like they will all have names that sound human, and a lot of your friends you don't see. Like a lot of my friends on WhatsApp, I don't see. They live in another country. They don't really see them on a
Mm.
regular basis. So psychologically, it won't take much for us to start piling them up and saying like, I'm talking to John, I'm talking to Steve, I'm talking to Anna, but who's human and who is AI? It doesn't matter on a daily basis, but it does matter on an existential level.
But it's actually one of the problems is that this natural language prompting thing is that it's sort of, it's very good at small talk. It's very good at that kind of chit chatter stuff. It's really easy to it's really easy for it to cheat us that way. It is, but the way where it's most productive is in formal language like coding. That's where it's really good, because then you don't have to interpret how you necessarily play test. It's just the language dictates how you can structure your code. So, but the productivity, my problem is the productivity claims of it. I like to narrow them down, like to make them control each other as well in some chains, so they just stay on point. Because, but I see a lot of the industry moving toward these more open-ended chaotic agents that can do things right in the world, act and insert records and decide the best possible route, right? But you just said so many times in different words that they are imprecise as well. So do you think? And now it's just an open question because I don't even know my own honest opinion on this. That we are going to get more productivity if we just put these imprecise robots everywhere. It's like if you had an AI that had some functions, you say you can pick one of these 100 functions. Why is it easier to write it in natural language and hoping that it understands it the right way than just clicking two category buttons and choosing the function?
Hmm.
Because you said
Well,
democracy, it's democratizing, but is it?
I I think that there are so many possibilities with AI and so many things we can do and things we can invent, problems we can solve, amazing things.
Mm,
But we have to remember that it is the same muscle that can create havoc.
mm,
And, it is just as stupid as it is smart, right? So when it does make mistakes, they're extremely stupid. Sometimes they're disguised as something because the language is advanced. So we don't see how stupid it really is. And that's another thing is that this machine that speaks our language, it is not like us. When people say, "Oh, it's like us," no, it's not. It's posing like us. I
mm,
mean, no matter what it does or how much human it sounds or, how much it asks how your day was, it's not anywhere near being human. Nowhere near. Like, it's not like just a little bit human. It's not more human than a toaster. And I think that
mm,
that's so important to remember when we give them names and we give them faces and they're nice and the interface is friendly and funny. This is a toaster that we're talking to, and it is posing as humans, and it is posing emotions. It doesn't have it. And if we don't understand that, we're going to put ourselves in a really weak position. And what I think is quite interesting also is that we talk about artificial intelligence, like as if intelligence is what we have, the human intelligence, and then we have created artificial intelligence that is like us.
mm,
But, Yuval Harari calls it alien intelligence and
mm,
talks, he says that this is not intelligence as we know it. It is something totally different. And I think that where we are right now, where the machine is posing as humans, it is only something that will go on for, it's a window of time where it makes it easier for us to talk to it. But, why should it continue to talk as humans? Because we are full of flaws. We are, really bad at very many things that the AI is very good at. The human language it's very soon going to run out of arguments for speaking the human language because the human language is inferior to coding maybe or
mm,
the language the machine can invent on its own. So I think that the artificial intelligence or the alien intelligence is going to be something totally different from us
mm,
very soon, and we won't be able to understand it. And of course, we're talking about AGI and like hyper super artificial intelligence. And when we reach that point, humans are going to be very inferior, not in the way that the AI is necessarily going to be conscious or be a species. It's just going to be a really efficient machine that we don't understand.
Yeah, but I think there's something wrong with that way of viewing it. I've been thinking a lot about it. I think there's something inherently flawed in it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have this hunch that there's something wrong in it because I think that it's language is humanism, right? It doesn't really exist without us. It still wouldn't, right? So why would they have language? Why would they communicate that way if we're not there to do it? And also the whole you study religion, right? So that I love my favorite example is the scene. AI is basically an unlimited supply. So God created everything in the whole world, but then He said, "By the way, Adam, I need you to name it because I don't have a clue what it's worth to you. Anyway, I just made these things, right? What do you think it's worth?" And that's not a task I think we can throw away or give away or can even outsource. We need to tell things what it's worth, right? And I think that you would just move up a fractal in the demand, cycle all the time. Every time something new comes in, and I'm a little bit afraid of this new language. Why would it make a new language that is not understandable by us? Because there's no point in it. There's no
Because it
point.
doesn't need us. It doesn't need us.
No, but it
Because,
has no inherent needs. That's what you said. It's a toaster.
well, that's the thing. That's why if it's making calculations on what is worthwhile or what makes sense in the world, that's why right now we really need to put ethics into the AI. Because if we're not doing that, why would it need us? Because the human race, you cannot really argue for it. It's ruining the planet. It's getting into wars. We can't agree on anything. People are killing each other. We're not really lifting the responsibility of the species that we have. And the AI can very quickly calculate that and say it doesn't need us because it's actually we're not doing anything good for the planet. And I think we do want to argue for humanity and we do want to stay relevant on this planet. And so in that way, we need to build in guardrails and ethics in the AI so that it doesn't start considering us as obsolete.
Don't you think that you're putting in a purpose in it? We don't need to put a purpose in it. What it wants to do, safeguard the world and kill all humans, right? That is a purpose. That is the goal that we're giving it. Right now, it has no goals. Of course, technology is neither good or bad, but and it's not neutral either, right? I know that, but it's still we don't have to tell it to do the best thing for the world. We just have it could just be a tool, right?
We're teaching it to be efficient. We're teaching it to be fast. We're teaching it to make calculations. And a lot of the times, the assignments that it's getting is about power and money, because that's how the human race thinks. Also, that's what we want. We want power and money and countries and superiority. So if we don't, if we're not conscious of how we have a bias of putting that into the AI, it will be a part of the AI. And even if it doesn't care about money or power, if it has learned from us that has value, why would it not continue to work in that direction?
Yeah, but I get I get where you're getting at. I think this just comes back to some of my initial gut reaction when I got your book from my wife. So who and the background was maybe she didn't really at that point work with it and use it. I used it a lot, talked a lot about it, and then I got a book saying arguments for humans and like read this and get smarter, right? So I felt maybe a little maybe my gut reaction initially was a slightly critical.
Why? Tell me more.
No, but simply because I thought that you saw these the big tech bros, or what we should call them, also saying that AI is dangerous, while at the same time hyping it. So saying AI is dangerous to me became a part of the hype, like saying, "Don't, this is fire. Don't play with fire. Ooh, it's dangerous, and everyone goes playing with fire." Right? There's something in that, saying this is super powerful and honestly, today what we're mostly seeing is still it's just hidden in the labs, right? They have fun poking fun at China and each other, and it's a big bro game.
It is a big bro game,
yeah,
and that's that's the problem. That it is again the elite, and it is very money driven, not less with Trump's bromances with all the tech companies. And I've worked in technology for more than 20 years, and I've always heard people saying technology could be bad, watch out. But that has been people who didn't know anything about technology. So the people who knew about technology were enthusiastic, had great ideas, saw all the possibilities. But, normal people would be like, oh, there's a new thing. I don't understand it. And what does it mean? And, maybe it was better when we had the radio instead of the TV. And, we've always seen that. The big difference here is that has absolutely changed. The role has reversed. Now it is people who know a lot about technology that say we really need to be careful. And it is a lot of regular people that say, oh, there's a new tool. That's fun. I can make a wedding speech, or I can write a press release very fast. Let's go. And I find that very interesting that it is people that actually have the most knowledge of the potential of this technology that are most worried about it. And as you say, at the same time, they don't want to leave it alone. OpenAI, I've heard Sam Altman talk a lot about this, and he is worried. He's saying no man like me should be have too much power in this area.
But it sounds like he's hunting a good quote. 100 years from now, Sam Altman said, I have become death, destroyer worlds. That Oppenheimer thing. I feel like they're all hunting the good quote, and they are playing on the hype. That's actually that was my question, right? Is your book
Mhm.
also a hype book?
Well, that's probably up to the reader, but I think that my book is an attempt to make people think. And it's also
Mm.
an attempt, and that's how I've been working with technology my whole career, is trying to communicate something that's quite complicated, or people think it's very complicated.
Mm.
This is extremely complicated, but I
Yes, it is.
do like to write in a language and um, make examples and references to history, culture, art, music, things that people relate to,
Mm.
and make sure that this is the way that I access my audience, is for them to not feel stupid ever. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know anything about technology. I can't read this book. Anyone can read this book, and you will understand it. It's not technologically difficult, but it is philosophical. It hopefully makes you think about what it means to be you and what it means to be a
Mm.
human, and how you want to spend your time, because we have quite limited amount of it because we are humans. But that also adds value to our life, that we have an expiration date. The machine can be upgraded theoretically forever. We do have an expiration date as humans, which
Yeah.
is why we have so many thoughts about being humans and create art and music, and have relationships that are important, where we feel like we want to stop time because we are so in love, or some of the other very important human emotions. Um,
But you
yeah,
get
so
my question was like, it seems like there's this binary question. I saying either yes the tech, or and then you said no the humans. So it seemed like it was an almost binary, and that's why I call it a hype discussion, because it's something that adds to the hype. Then we have in the newspapers, we have people saying AI everywhere, and we have the other people saying AI. No, be careful. We get a two position game,
mm.
which
Well,
I
I do
which
work
I
a lot
tend
with
on.
AI.
Yeah, but in my spine, I always get feel critical of those two positions when there's only two.
Well, I hope that there's more than two, and I really make an effort not to um, represent any polarized position.
Mm.
Um, and I think what I do most is in the book is that I say I don't have the answer to this, but I would like you with me to think
Yeah.
about it. And I do that in the beginning of the book, and I'm very conscious of doing this, because I'm not a voice that's right or wrong. I'm a voice that hopefully can make you think. And if you
Yes.
disagree with me, that's fine. But at least you've made a conscious decision. And
You're unpacking the
and what
complexity. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
what worries me the most, if we make decisions without having done the hard work,
Mm.
gone through, if you're a company, you need to research what could be the consequences of this technology. We add this thing to our company, how is it going to affect the workers, for example,
Mm.
how is it going to affect the product or the environment, or, what could go wrong? And you could argue that this is sort of, oh, you're so negative. You're seeing the glasses half full. Why should we always focus on the negative? It is because we need to do that exercise to avoid the negative. And
Mm.
hopefully 99% of the time, it will be a process that is unnecessary, but it's an insurance. You don't
Mm.
use an insurance, hopefully. You don't want to use the insurance, but you do want to have it. And having the analysis of the consequences is the insurance
Mm.
that I
Mm.
find very important. Yesterday, I was having a discussion about music and AI, and I was saying, like I said previously here, that I want to know if the AI was written by a human or a human
The
being.
music was written by human. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said AI.
So an AI, a human being, right? So that is my opinion, that I want to know that, because I don't
Mm.
want to have a human experience listening to something that's made from a soulless machine. That is
Mm.
my choice and idea of what it means to be human. But if you say, I don't care because I can't hear the difference, that can be your choice. And I'm not saying one or the other is wrong or right. I'm just saying, let's, give us the choice.
Yeah.
Give us the understanding that, I don't want to listen to any music on Spotify that is AI created, for example, because that also doesn't support the artists. And if the artists don't have a living, we're going to in 10 years look back and say, hey, do you remember the time when humans made music? That was fun and great and
Mm.
emotional. but it was cheaper and faster and easier for the AI to make it. And now we've lost all the musicians.
Yeah, yeah, but I also think in the conversation here, I was trying to be a little bit polemic, maybe being a little bit binary myself in my comment before or my question before, but I think you're pointing out a lot of things that and also so far in the conversation, the complexities of this, it's not simple to say yes or no to it, and I think we need the discussions to see where will it make sense to do, where will it not make sense to do. But for me, and I said this just before we started recording. For me, I realized, I think it's only 2 weeks ago, I realized that it is so semantically loaded for me when I discuss AI and when I write posts on LinkedIn, that maybe sometimes I might do a lot of memes and fun stuff as well. And then I write some comments underneath. I try to always be critical and constructive at the same time. So always being like, be careful, or this is a bad idea, but you could fix it by thinking this way. And I think it's just so difficult because there's always this, and I'm always worried in the comments, do people see me as either too negative? Sometimes they do, and I'm like, okay, I missed out, I made a mistake, or too positive. Yeah, why? I don't want to be either. I want to be
Mm.
right there. Where's the value? Not where's the hype? Because hype is just
But you know what is binary? Machines. Machines are binary. They think in black and white, ones and zeros.
touche. I love it.
Human beings are not binary by nature. We are extremely nuanced. We navigate in gray zones. That's one of the things that we are very good at. The machine is not good at all. It's like understanding that there are two different things in the play right now. You can hate and love someone at the same time. You can want something and not want it at the same time. You can be irrational in your acts. And that is something that is uniquely human. And that is why it's also possible for us to have, ideally, a constructive conversation where we can understand that someone has a different opinion than us and understand where they're coming from and still say, but I'm of a different opinion. And how can we compromise between these two? That is a very, very human way of negotiating. And the machine does not necessarily negotiate like that because it depends on the goals. And it doesn't necessarily see a compromise as a success. Because who wins in a compromise? Nobody wins in a compromise. No, everybody wins. Nobody loses. Again, there's the winners and losers at the same time. How weird is that? But that's what a compromise is. And the machine, if it's programmed to it, wants success and it wants to win, or it wants the situation to win, or it wants the product to earn a lot of money, or it wants the company to grow, or whatever it has as a command. And I just think that results, when you look at how the human race look at a success, it's not necessarily the same as how a machine would look at a success.
And also we see this we've seen this with social media, right? Obviously, the obvious example, right, where it just sees you staying there, you clicking the right ad banners, that's success, and it's not success for you, and then you lose your you might go into a rabbit hole or a echo chamber and lose your sense of the discussion going on, and then we get too narrow, right? And this discussion, this is actually what I'm thinking a lot about. How can we enable the discussion, use AI to enable a discussion with ourselves? Because there's, and the DeepSeek moment really, a couple of weeks ago, really hit home for me because it was just so much a discussion about AI models. And I was just all the time thinking, okay, so now we have even more, we can have unlimited pre-trained large language models, but we also have pre-trained societies and pre-trained organizations and pre-trained value chains and value streams and customers and all that. And it's not just easy. You don't just go in with some technology and bam, everything's changed. And that's also why I read in your book, right? And there's actually a note I did just before we had the recording that you, in the end, you set up two roads, right? Either the ultra liberal, set free, go crazy route. So now I'm going to go binary on you again, Christiane. Sorry about that. And second road is that we could go reflected, regulated route, right? As sort of like the opposites to some extent. But I think personally, I think there's a pace of change here. There's a dialogue. It's not, technology doesn't just change we've had these for 2.5 years now, and I still do mostly the same things as I used to do. Okay. Yeah. Every now and then I have a conversation with my AI in my car, that because I have a topic to discuss and I just want to brainstorm. But more beyond that, I don't think the world has changed that much yet, because it has to be a conversation between a pre-trained AI and a pre-trained world, right? Don't you think so?
Mhm. Well, first of all, in the end of my book, I present these two different roads we could go down. So, like as you said, there's the very sort of liberal, let's go, look at all the possibilities. We can do amazing things with this, but that is without guardrails and without having sort of the ethical conversations about it. And the other one is the very restricted and regulated way. But I do have a third option that is the right way. I have the three. And I don't have the answers for the right way, but I do, in that chapter where I talk about the right way, discuss how we merge these two things. How do we manage to find some place between these two poles? That is, these are the arguments that we hear now, right? We hear about, let's go. Denmark or Europe is too far behind. Why didn't we do more? Why did we regulate too much? And the other one that's like, we really need to be careful with this because it can have really bad consequences if we're not. So, of course, there's a middle road, but nobody has this middle road yet. And I think that the big complexity in this is that we really don't understand this technology and the results and the future of it. We can't. It's too complex. So sometimes it's like moving in two different tracks. Like you have the one track where you're like, yeah, let's implement this. Can we use it in the municipalities and schools? And how do we do this? And then you have the other one that's like really about humanity and the human race and the future of the human race. So that's the more existential track. But I just think it's so important that that track is not sidetracked, because it is a part of this that
my point is, don't you think that when we have a discussion about how to implement it in schools, that we have that discussion also at the same time?
Yeah, on a practical, accessible level.
Yeah.
But I think the other level is, and that's why I'm saying that when you as a tech company, whenever you hire a programmer, hire a humanist also. Make sure you hire a philosopher, a historian, a priest, like just people who see the world on an existential level also. Like how do we contain being human, or should we start discussing redefining what it means to be human? Human beings are merging with technology in a way that means that, in a few years we'll have a chip in the brain that will give us superpowers. Are we still humans when that happens, or have we become something different? With that merge with the machine,
that
right?
is definitely that point scares me. I must admit that, but I'm typically very this whole the dystopian, utopian, the sci-fi dreams of having, I don't know, C-3PO or all of us wiped out, or I tend to be like, okay, that's for Hollywood movies, because when I see
I don't think
Enterprise
3CPO would wipe anyone out.
but when I see people trying to adopt it always becomes so cumbersome, because it's touching things, right? Hype and all these utopian, dystopian stories, they sort of move through a vacuum space. We're touching nothing, right? But as soon as they touch the reality of my boring accounts payable process or something, it slows down, don't you think?
Okay, so let's talk about something very real and the consequences of it. So when we have AI, it works on a big pile of data. And in that data, there will always be bias. That it is impossible to avoid, because if you need to avoid bias, you'll have to have all the information of the world in one place with all the eyes of the world at the same time looking at it.
The whole world is biased, exactly. Yes.
You can't avoid bias. So there's always bias in the data, and there can also be a bias in the calculations on the data. So I do a lot of prompting and images. And if I want to prompt like a data scientist or an engineer or an astronaut or a mechanic or even a doctor, the default is a man. The image will always be of a man, because that is the story the data tells. An astronaut is a man. On the other hand, in society, we do want to make some changes, most of us. We do believe that women can be CEOs, right? So when you prompt an image of a CEO, it should also be able to be a woman, right? And you should also be able to see a man that's on a paternity leave, that's taking care of his child. But the data does not support that, because the data is historic, right? And it doesn't necessarily correlate with the future that we want to have. But with AI, we are reproducing and spreading this bias and these stories about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be colored, how society is. But that's not necessarily how the society we want. And in that way, working with AI, because it's so amplifying the result, it's amplifying everything it does because it's so efficient, and we can spread it very quickly, and we can see so many examples of dark forces that want to spread something fake very quickly and manipulate even like elections in countries. So in 2 years, 90% of the internet content is predicted to be created by AI. So imagine that internet with all that biases recreated and reproduced and amplified.
But evil tongues would say you already have that internet with all that bias, but just human bias. The problem is, I saw someone being addressed that. I can't remember. It was another podcast. I'm honestly annoyed that I can't remember who it was, but it was. He said that yeah, there are biases in these machines, but you can actually change them. You can code them to be different. If you take a human, it's really, really difficult to change your biases. It takes ages.
That's also
Society's
true.
changed so slowly.
You can use AI to avoid bias in a recruiting process, for example.
Yeah.
The human beings look at the name or age or something, and they think that might not be the right person for the job because they're too old or they have the wrong name.
I don't want to hire
color.
an Indian woman, so I'll please. I can't put that into AI. So I just AI doesn't work because
So no, but that's some of the things that actually where AI can work against the human biases. But the thing is that AI has bias and humans have bias. So you're saying the internet is already full of bias. Yeah, but human beings can't produce as much content as AI can. We can never compete with the amount and the speed of AI. So when the AI just spreads all this on the internet, no matter how many blog posts or podcasts you and me make, we can't compete content-wise with what the AI can produce.
But I have, and you probably also have these AI bot commenters on your posts. I'm getting those more and more, which is a little bit weird. I don't think it adds value to my LinkedIn. I don't think it adds value to my Facebook. Facebook is a crappy place. Don't you think that this is something that's going to sort of kill off? That is actually what I'm thinking most about. Maybe this is the death of the internet because now it's irrelevant. And there's this whole humans, and as I said, we give names to things. We say if this is valuable or not, and this might be viable for a developer, right? A minimal product for a developer, but it's not viable for us. We don't care. I don't need it. I don't need that kind of Facebook. I don't like. I think it was Tom Goodwin, who's always been on the podcast. He said on a post a couple of weeks ago that everything was better 10 years ago. Am I not right? It's like Google was better. My Gmail was better, my Facebook was better, my Instagram was better, LinkedIn was better, everything was better 5-10 years ago. What's going on?
It's the increased complexity. It doesn't necessarily make things better. And I think Facebook is an example of something that I cannot believe how many people use that has such a bad interface and is so ugly and adds so little value.
Do you use it, Christiane? Do you use it?
I don't use Facebook now.
I use LinkedIn.
But I do use Instagram, and I've recently jumped off Twitter, even if that was a place that I really loved, again, 5-10 years ago. It really added value, and it was, for me, a place where I could talk to smart people and exchange, and that stopped. It's become very negative and very deconstructive.
But do you think is it a bet on the human attention that we can keep on expanding our attention? Because I don't think we can. I think there's a limit to it. That's my fear. Not my fear, but to some extent, my fear is that there's a limit to the attention that we have, which means that in the end, we'll figure out that most of the internet and most of these social media are actually useless, irrelevant. They take up too much clutter in our mind because they keep on trying to just push more and more on us, right?
But you're absolutely right. We have limits.
And
That's
then it will kill up
humans.
themselves, right? But what if they didn't kill off themselves? It's a super weird argument, right? And it's not very utopian dystopian, but there's some routes to go to that utopia dystopia future which involves that we all just think Facebook right now is the best place in the world, especially when they introduce even more AI agents into my feed. And I don't think it is. And I know a lot of people who don't think it is. And I know all my kids, they hate Facebook because it's a crappy place. So if everything is going that way, do we even want them in the future? And
I don't think everything is going that way. I think that chatbots are going to win over Facebook, and Google, or communities based on AI in a different way than, I find
But
it
it's
very
still a
old
bet.
school.
It's still a bet, right? It's still a market that doesn't exist that we're trying to create, isn't it?
It's true, but isn't it always like that? We're always, trying to evolve. But when you say that you are afraid that we have limitations, I mean, we totally have limitations. That's a fact. And we cannot, as the complexity and honestly the noise of it all is something that we just don't want and we can't comprehend, right? So I think you're absolutely right that we're going to see sort of a simpler tools. We need simpler tools. And we also, I think, need more transparency in how this works. And I'm saying I think because I think that from an ethical perspective, it's a big problem that we don't understand how these algorithms work. There's the other perspective is that we don't care because it's efficient and we get what we want. But have we really considered what we want? That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's where I really want us to think, because I get the right ad maybe that I can use for something because I was looking for that product, or yes, I'm entertained on TikTok. But if I actually sit down and discuss with my friends, what do I want? Maybe I don't want to be entertained death scrolling on TikTok. Maybe I want to. Maybe there's an alternative to that. Maybe I don't want to buy something because the algorithm has told me to, or date someone, or listen to music, or watch a movie because the algorithm told me to. Maybe I do want to explore it in a more organic way. And which is also why I think that we are going to be seeing a rise in organic experiences, like more. We won't be able to tell the difference between humans and AI, which means that the only place we can do that is if we physically spend time with humans.
We'll be buying vinyl in an age of Spotify,
buying
right?
vinyl. I have a whole chapter about vinyl in my book, and why it's so cool. And one of the things is that it's super complicated and difficult, just like human beings. That's what makes us interesting.
Exactly.
We are not easy to be around, but we do bring something to the table with being humans and being, complex. So I think it's a very important time in history for the human race to be very philosophical about what it means to be human and what we want and what kind of future we want. Because if we don't consider it now, we will be looking back in a few years saying, oh, we should have thought about that, because now it's not what we want.
Or we should actually just start saying that, okay, we can all agree this is the good thing, and start doing things instead of sitting down talking and thinking all the time. I think that's also the opposite, right? That these tech firms will just keep on doing whatever they do because there's a market for it, right? But we could also say, okay, but we have some standards. We have, the EU regulations, right? But there's no large language model in the EU. There's hardly any digital infrastructure shared by all the countries. We could be more proactive on saying what we want as well, right? Instead of just sitting down being critical. I think there's a tendency for the opposite. There is the aggressive tech hype on innovation. Labs from Silicon Valley just pushing out technology, and then there's the opposite, where we are just saying, "Oh, we need to consider, we need to discuss, we need to figure out, and start having philosophy discussions as well." But we also at some point just need to say, "Okay, maybe Facebook, maybe Google, maybe all those, maybe that's critical infrastructure. Maybe we need a public alternative to it." Right?
No, but I agree. I agree on that, and I think that the EU has been extremely slow on competing with products from especially the US, but also from Asia, and I think that that's a mistake. And I think that also things will start happening in that space. But when you're saying we should consider what we want, it is the same thing. It's the same exercise as saying what we don't want, hopefully. Or I think it should be, right?
I know, but that's just a difference to how deep you go, right? You can go extremely deep on that. The problem is that when do we cut it and say, now let's do something, right? It's that whole action thing that annoys me a little bit. I think in Danish, Christiane Vejlø and Sonny Thompson once wrote the critique of den negative opbyggelighed, the criticism of the negative.
Good luck with that.
A criticism of being critical, right? Because they said it's so easy to be critical, so they wrote a criticism of being critical. But I don't. Yeah, they understood the problem of that paradox. But the point is, it's really easy to take the critical perspective all the time. It's really difficult to say we want this. This is the this is the good life, this is what we need, this is what we need to build. And that's why it seems somehow we are in a capitalist liberal society, just outsourcing that to whatever vendor we have available, right? Define what I want, right? And if I buy it, it's probably the good thing. And you're saying we should do the opposite. But how do we make a choice? Who wants to take that choice? That's a political choice. That's a political discussion, isn't it? Really? That's what we have politicians for. Uncomfortable decisions, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the fact is that you can't develop anything without it, without having some considerations of how you're going to use this product, who is going to use this product, what is the criteria of success for this product. So this process is always a part of creating something new. But the speed of AI is so much faster than anything we've seen before. So if we don't have these ethical guardrails, we are in the risk of losing control. And I think that, I mean, I don't consider myself actually very negative, but I do consider myself as someone that advocates for considerations. Because I don't want to stand and, you can't uninvent things. And you saw it with Niels Bohr, and you saw it with the atom bomb, that there's a technology that it doesn't, it's not created for that purpose where it ends up. And then you see, some of the people behind it eventually saying, like, this is not what we wanted with this technology. And I think we can very easily land in that place with AI, even though it does, like, nuclear power is also an opportunity that comes out of the work that has been done that also became the atom bomb, right? And nuclear power is one of the things that we're looking at now that could maybe be a solution to the climate crisis. So there's always a two-edged sword to technology, which is why, make sure that you have people that represent both sides when you make a product or when you want to develop, because you want to be ahead of what could go wrong.
But you see, it's easy. It must be easy for you also to get casted in the role, right, of being the negative one, isn't it?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of the times I get told that I've worked in technology for 20 years. I tested almost every gadget there was for a really long time. I've been very enthusiastic, but I have also been in technology for so long, and I have also learned things. And I have also seen that we don't necessarily need to have such fast product cycles because it's not good for the environment, and we produce so much hardware, for example. So I came from a space where I always wanted the new thing, and now I'm not like that anymore. And I think that that's a process that I have seen a lot of people in my space, in the tech space, going through, realizing some things. And I think the worst thing, I mean, getting back to where we started, nothing is constant but change. What worries me the most is people that don't change. If somebody would say to me, like, why are you suddenly so critical? That's weird. You used to be so positive. I said, yeah, because I'm smarter now, and that's how we should all develop throughout our lives.
That's a great answer. That's a really great answer. It's a really great answer, actually. And I'm also being polemic, right? I'm supposed to be a little bit, right? I think Maria Santa Caterina earlier on the podcast called it adaptive resilience, which is also the name of a book, that we need to have adaptive resilience, right?
Yes.
And actually, I think that's a brilliant concept. It also rhymes a lot with what you're saying. But at the same time, I also think that sometimes we're overdoing the potential. I think we are looking at birds and seeing how they fly, and then we invented a plane and it doesn't fly the same way, and we need to figure out how does it then fly. It can't land the same way, it can't go up and down that quickly, and helicopters, the one who invented helicopters, imagine we would all take them to supermarket trips, right? And that would just create havoc if we did that. but you see, the way we end up using the technology is not necessarily as simple as, and often we end up building airports or different structures to accommodate them. And I think I personally think we'll do that also with this. We just need to figure out how and where. There's a flood of something, I don't know exactly. It is leaking, I think. My point is, it's leaking in areas where we might not want it to leak, and then it's also generating some value in some other places where we want it to generate that value. But it's
what is leaking?
The AI is leaking. It's not like a flood of just flushing away everything in society. I don't see it that way right now. I see more something that's dripping somewhere. Oh, that was unintended. That was unintended. And then there's something that sort of adapts to it because we are entrenched, right? We are path dependent. We are. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too stoic here. I don't know. It just feels like things are a little bit. There's just I like I said, the pre-trained AI models, but the pre-trained world, right? And this conversation has to be a conversation. It's not just an implementation. It's not just there's a world out there, right? There's a world out there. That's my point.
But I actually like that sentence, pre-trained AI and pre-trained world, because that's true. But we have to remember that the pre-trained world is based on experience. The training is based on experience, a human experience. And again, the AI can, you can say that the AI can experience because it can have sensors or it can get data that it's calculating on or whatever. You can call that the AI experience. But it doesn't have, a body or understand that what it means to be a body in a three-dimensional world, in a place where there's gravity and you can touch someone, and what it means to touch someone, and why you should pet a dog, because what's the point of petting a dog? The dog likes it, you like it, it gives you a good feeling, but doesn't understand that,
No.
So I think that even though I do agree that you have that AI is pre-trained and human beings are pre-trained, it's just a different type of training.
Yeah, but also about the change, right? How aggressive the change will be, and how dystopian. I mean, how much it will just turn it all on its head. I think there's some value that I really believe that humans move up the demand cycle, right? When or demand fractal. When we invent new things, we just want more complexity. We just demand something more complex tomorrow. That's
but
how we
before
usually
you said that we wanted less, actually, because you said it's becoming too much, and it's we want.
Yeah, but that's on the internet. I'm afraid that the internet or the Facebook social media is becoming something that we might at the end kill off because it's not bringing value. If it's irrelevant, right? If it brings me irrelevant news and AI generated comments on my post, then I ditch it. Yes, I think I will actually. It annoys me so much, and I think it will. Don't you think so?
Yeah, me too. That's why I don't use Facebook. I mean, I do have accounts, but just yesterday I was trying to figure out how I delete photos on Facebook. Couldn't do it. I have a page and I do use Messenger, but I use LinkedIn and Blue Sky and Instagram now.
Yeah.
And it totally annoys me, and I think it's a waste of time. But I think that again, one person asked me after I had a keynote talk the other day, and he was very happy about the talk, and he's like, "Yeah, that's true, but we are all in this room very well educated, and we are all considering this. And if you look at the whole world, people might not care, or they might not understand what the consequences could be." And I think that is also a factor, that we are very much in danger of creating this polarization between the technologically advanced people who will start, like the same people that probably eating organic or stop eating meat, they will also detox on social media because it's not of value and it doesn't look good actually for your image. And then you'll have the other ones that are consuming it, and they're the same people that are consuming ultra processed foods or whatever. And I think that's a really, really a big problem, because the next step is that the advanced species will maybe integrate the chip in the brain and become even more advanced and superior to the ones that can't afford that. They will have better bodies, they will have better brains, they will look better, and with the whole longevity wave, we're already down that track. And I think that that's going to create very, very big gap between the, what you could call like the technologically intellectuals and the rest, the advanced species towards the rest, which unfortunately could become redundant if that society is ruled by those values, or by some values that depending on which way we go. But I don't want to live in a world where a part of the human race is redundant. You could argue that I already do. People do consider the part of the human race less than others. I don't want more of that. I want more equality, and I don't see technology helping us towards it.
It's back to the whole what is the value of a human life, right? That's where we're ending up here, Christiane. If we go further down this route, right? What is it? Is it citizenship? What is it because it's breathing? Or is it the same value? Is it what it gets paid in salary, right? But I also think that you're right in pointing out the other thing, that how that trying to the John Rawls argument, trying to decide society behind a veil of uncertainty, that you don't know tomorrow where you're going to be in society. So who you're going to be, so you no matter who you wake up as tomorrow, you'll be satisfied. That is actually my core political belief, or what you could call ideology, to see how can I, and I think that is definitely a thing. I also see that the complexity of working with these AI models that are actually quite complex, and then people are told this is natural language, as we talked about in the beginning, is something that puzzles me a lot. How do we bridge that gap and explain to them the complexity of what they're actually sitting in front of, and how it's not exactly what they might feel it is. Both to say, be afraid of it, but also say, please use it the right way, because adoption is also a problem, right? So it's that's why I said, you're in both. I'm in both camps, right? Saying, okay, please don't use it for this, but please do use it for this, because this is what makes sense, right? And
No,
it's
but
super
I think
difficult.
that we could use AI to lessen the inequality in the world.
Yeah, I think
I
so
would
too.
hope that. But what I usually like to say is that working with technology, you shouldn't start out with technology. Like, you shouldn't say, okay, I want to implement more technology. How can I use it? Right? You should say, like, okay, let's take a look into the future. How do we envision that future? What do we want in that future? So let's set those goals. This is what we want. Then you can look at your own values as a human being, or as a company, or as a world, and say, like, what values are important for us to get there? Like, what values don't we want to lose? Is it privacy? Is it equality? What is it that is important for us? And then say, how can we get technological tools to help us? But the navigation, the compass for it all, is the values that we have as human beings, and the visions we have of the future, of what we want that to be like, and a future that we actually want to live in. But the technology should come in as a third.
The conversation starts with us, right? Exactly.
I believe so.
Christiane, I had a lot of things I wanted to talk to you about, and I think we've covered most of them in different ways than I maybe envisioned when we started out.
Yeah, we've really been everywhere
I
almost.
think so. We have, and I think it's been a really brilliant conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, me too.
And I have a final question, if you're ready for that one.
Sure.
So, Christiane, what is the only constant?
Well, I do need to return to where we started, and my necklace, saying that the only constant is change. So I have changed. Everybody changes. Everything around us changes, and the interaction between us and the world changes. And adapting to that is going to be one of the most important skills in the future we're going into, to understanding, how is the world changing around us, and how do we quickly adapt to that. If it is big problems like inequality and environment, if it is smaller problems, if it's on a totally personal level, that you're in a different spot in your personal life and you want that to be different, or you want to be able to live with that in a better way, whether you've been fired or divorced or you have illness in your family, that is something that comes from the outside that you have to adjust to. And we as human beings will always be exposed to something that comes from the outside. And there's another thing that I like to live by. And now you mentioned Stoicism before, and one of the sort of main sort of points of Stoicism is that you have things in your life that you cannot change, right? That you cannot do anything about it. You can, but then you have other things that you can change. But you are exposed to things that are effect. You might be divorced and you have to deal with that. In that, now it becomes very philosophical. But in dealing with something that you cannot change, the situation that you cannot change, you have to change yourself or your point of view to that. So if you look at the AA movement, they have that prayer that's asked for help as a human being to understand what can I do anything about, like how can I do something and when can I not do something. And then I think the biggest challenge for us is to accept when you cannot do something. And that is actually accepting there is a constant. But the constant is, it doesn't mean that you cannot change yourself. So what the world brings you, you can change your mindset and you can say, I have to accept this. There are some things you need to accept. And then there are a lot of other things that you absolutely shouldn't accept. And you really should be active in trying to change it and playing a role. But for example, being a human being, meeting challenges, meeting disease, meeting death, it's a part of being a human being as we are right now. And for me, that's a lot. There's a lot of wisdom in daring to accept that. And I see with the technological development, a lot of people that don't want to accept that. And I don't think that's going to make life easier. I think life is easier when you do lean back and say, I'm a human being, and that's okay with everything that comes with it.
So, to some extent, leaning into being who you are and accepting, sometimes resigning in the face of change if you cannot change it, but also all the time accepting change as a baseline. That is the only constant, Christiane.
Yeah, you could say that. And then you could say, will this matter in a year? Try to put some perspective on it. And you can say, I say that to my daughter a lot, this too will change. It's a quote from the Buddha. Everything will change. So don't hang on too hard to anything, not your successes, but also not your failures, because everything will change.
My wife bought a comic, a small drawing, that's on our wall at home. It says, this is just a phase, it says. And I love that.
It's another word for it.
Thank you so much for being on The Only Constant, Christiane, and thank you for giving us this brilliant constant. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.